Given the experience you had in the job searching process, is there anything that you wished you'd done differently or focused on more before you actually started applying? What do you wish you did that you didn't, that you're like, oh, I kind of dropped the ball. It would have been good if I did X, Y, or Z?
Probably before doing Firehose, I probably would have gone out and just brushed up on a lot of the stuff that I didn't, maybe really just brushed up on my JavaScript some more, really nailed a little bit more of the HTML, CSS, learned some of the, the frameworks like Bootstrap, stuff like that. But for the most part, I think that was fine. Learned a lot in Firehose. I don't know if I would have done anything different while I was in there. I was busy. I was learning a lot. The places where I feel like I wish I had a little bit more when I was interviewing and when I was out in the dev world is knowing a lot more about databases in general and SQL queries and how they work and how to really optimize them. Just knowing more. It felt like a lot of whiteboarding type questions, a lot of interview questions focused on database and that sort of area. Focusing a little bit more on testing and maybe knowing a little bit more about RSpec and practice just looking at other code bases. Dive into open source projects. They always looked overwhelming and I kind of shied away from them. Open them up, pull them into your local environment and just pick through them and learn how to go through and explore a new database and collaborate with people. Like I was at a Boston Ruby meetup one time, chatting with somebody else who was learning Ruby. I was like, why don't we help each other out on each other's projects? So once a week, we'd have a half-hour phone chat and kind of do a stand-up with each other. The more people you collaborate with, I think the better. So all of those things I'd focus more on.
So what do you think about from like the database perspective? Do you think it's more about like writing SQL queries, like modeling data in sort of like abstract ways, both?
I think it's understanding at the core how a database works. I think it's understanding not necessarily how to write raw SQL, but how understanding what raw SQL looks like when you see it and understanding what it means when you see, an inner join. What is that? Understanding at its core why it works, so that when you're in active record and you do a find by versus a where and first, how do those differ? Why is one optimized versus the other? Why do you put an includes in there if you're, so it's just a lot of these optimizations and what they do at the database level. As you get into that stuff, it feels like it was an area I wanted to learn more about.
My biggest thing that I wish I worked on was TDD because Firehose didn't have a TDD section when I graduated. So I had to learn it independently. So thank you for that, Ken.
Sorry.
But yeah, that was really my only thing that I really wish I had more work in was TDD. Everything else was great. I felt very well prepared for all the interviews. I felt very well prepared for a job. So that was it, really just TDD. I think just working hard. And maybe my one regret would be that for about a month and a half, rather than continuing to build things in code, I was so focused on the interviews that I pretty much stopped. So not giving up on, what you like to do to try to do it professionally. So don't forget to keep building stuff.
I think this is a tricky one. On the basic side, yeah, I agree. TDD, thanks, Ken.
Sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, TDD is something definitely that I wish I would have had more on my tool bag. Building apps, building a couple more, even if it's smaller projects. Just build stuff that's not part of the course. Just build, even if it's simple things, just build a couple of them because it gives you something else to talk about when you're going into these interviews. The reason I think it's a tricky question is that if, I get it, like you're trying to avoid the same things like, hey, if we're better prepared, then, you might have a better time at this. You could jump into the problem of now, when do you ever feel ready to go into start interviewing? And I think that's what's tricky about it, because if I start looking back and like, yeah, I should have done X, I should have done Y, then maybe I still wouldn't feel ready. I think as a baseline, if you finish Firehose, then don't worry about other things that you should have. Like Ben said, we didn't have TDD when we went through it, and somehow we still landed a position somewhere, right? So right off the bat, you're better equipped than we were. So that's just something to think about. Finishing a structured course like this is enough. It's a good validation. It gives you enough confidence to say, hey, you know what, I'm ready to do that. Can you do more? Of course, go ahead and do more, but don't let that be why you don't feel ready to start interviewing, why you're going to be more nervous about it. Trust us, the panel, like I got to know Ben, and Aaron a little bit, we're all decent coders, but none of us are like master coders of the universe or anything. Don't worry, you have enough in the tool bag to start landing some of these gigs that are out there. People need coders. There's a huge demand for them. You have a skill that not many people have.